Hello everyone. Tonight, we travel back to early 19th century America into the heart of Tennessee, where a family became the center of one of the most terrifying and mysterious hauntings ever recorded. This is the story of the Bell Witch, a supernatural entity that tormented the Bell family for years, leaving behind tales of horror, voices in the night, and a legend that still chills the bones of anyone who hears it. The Bell Witch haunting is not just folklore. It is considered by many to be one of the most documented cases of a violent, intelligent spirit in history. Our story begins in Robertson County, Tennessee, in the year 1817. John Bell, a respected farmer, had settled there with his family years earlier. He lived a life of hard work, raising crops, tending livestock, and raising his children. The Bell farm was a successful one, and the family was well known in the community. But what began as a quiet, prosperous life would soon turn into a nightmare. It started with small, almost unnoticeable disturbances. John Bell was walking through his cornfield when he spotted a strange animal in the distance. He later described it as a creature with the body of a dog and the head of a rabbit. Puzzled and unnerved, he raised his gun and fired, but the creature vanished without a trace. Shaking it off as a trick of the eye, John returned home. But this was only the beginning. That very night, the Bell family began to hear strange noises in their house. Scratching, gnawing, and knocking sounds echoed from the walls and floors. At first, they thought it might be rats or some other animal infestation. But when they searched, they found nothing. As nights passed, the noises grew louder and stranger. Chains dragging across the floor, choking sounds, heavy footsteps pacing through empty rooms. The disturbances escalated quickly. Soon, the children began to complain of being pulled and pinched by invisible hands. Their blankets were yanked away at night, their hair pulled sharply, and red handprints appeared on their skin as if slapped by unseen forces. One of the daughters, Betsy Bell, became the primary target of the attacks. She suffered relentless torment, her hair tied in knots, her face slapped, and her body thrown about by something unseen. The Bell family was terrified but hesitant to speak of the events, fearing ridicule from their neighbors. But the entity grew bolder, and hiding the haunting became impossible. Visitors to the Bell home experienced the same horrors. Friends and neighbors who stayed the night reported being assaulted, hearing disembodied voices, and witnessing objects moving on their own. Word spread quickly through Robertson County that the Bell family was being tormented by a witch. Soon the strange entity found its voice. At first, it whispered softly in the darkness, too quiet to understand. But over time, the whispers grew stronger until they became clear words. The voice was unlike anything human, raspy, mocking, and filled with malice. It introduced itself as Kate, and from then on, the entity was called Kate Bat's Witch, or simply the Bell Witch. Kate claimed she had been wronged by John Bell in a land deal and swore vengeance against him and his family. Whether or not this was true remains unclear. But the spirit's hatred of John Bell was undeniable. It vowed to kill him, and it made no secret of its intentions. Yet strangely, while the witch was violent and cruel to the Bells, it sometimes engaged in conversations with visitors, reciting sermons, singing hymns, or mimicking voices perfectly. This strange mix of cruelty, intelligence, and supernatural power made it one of the most baffling hauntings in history. The Bell Witch's torment of the family reached terrifying levels. Betsy, the young daughter, was attacked constantly. She would scream in terror as invisible hands slapped her, or as she was dragged from her bed across the floor. Witnesses saw the attacks, but could do nothing to stop them. The witch seemed to feed off Betsy's suffering, and it delighted in mocking her cries. The cruel spirit even tormented her romantic life. Betsy had become engaged to Joshua Gardner, a local young man, but whenever they met, the witch would harass them relentlessly, taunting, threatening, and even physically assaulting Betsy until she finally broke off the engagement. Heartbroken and terrified, Betsy's youth was overshadowed by the entity's cruel interference. But while Betsy was the main target of abuse, John Bell suffered the witch's greatest wrath. The spirit despised him and declared openly that it would be the one to end his life. Over the years, John became frail and weak, plagued by mysterious fits and a strange paralysis of the mouth. The witch often mocked him, calling him Old Jack, and gleefully announcing that his end was near. The haunting was not limited to the Bell home. People from miles around came to witness the strange phenomena, and the witch seemed to relish performing for an audience. It recited Bible verses, debated theology, and sang hymns for hours. Sometimes it even carried on conversations with multiple people at once, as if it had knowledge beyond human ability. These public displays drew crowds, and the Bell Farm became infamous across Tennessee. One of the most remarkable visitors to the Bell home was none other than General Andrew Jackson, who would later become the 7th President of the United States. Curious about the stories, Jackson traveled with a group of men to the Bell property in 1819. According to legend, as they approached, their wagon suddenly stopped, stuck as if held by an invisible force. No matter how hard the horses strained, the wagon would not move. Jackson, said to be both fascinated and unnerved, reportedly exclaimed that it must be the work of the witch. Soon after, a disembodied female voice rang out, mocking the group and challenging them to continue. The wagon was suddenly released, and they proceeded. That night, Jackson's men stayed at the Bell home, but their experience was anything but ordinary. As they settled in, one man boasted that he was not afraid of the witch. Almost immediately, he cried out in pain, slapped and beaten by invisible hands. He was thrown across the room, and the voice of the witch laughed in triumph. Terrified, Jackson and his men fled the farm the next day. Though details vary, the story spread far and wide, adding to the legend's power. The torment continued for years. The witch's voice became stronger, and her attacks more violent. The Bells lived in constant fear, unable to find peace. John Bell's health deteriorated steadily under the witch's relentless harassment. On December 20, 1820, John Bell died after slipping into a coma. At his bedside, the family discovered a strange vial of dark liquid. The witch's voice rang out, gleeful and mocking, declaring that she had given him the poison and fulfilled her promise. At John Bell's funeral, mourners claimed they heard the witch laughing and singing loudly, mocking the grieving family. But even after John Bell's death, the haunting did not end completely. The witch continued to torment Betsy for a time, though her attacks lessened. Eventually, the spirit announced it would leave, but promised to return years later. And according to some accounts, it did. The Bell Witch legend did not fade away. It became one of the most enduring and terrifying ghost stories in American folklore, passed down through generations. Even today, visitors to the area claim strange experiences, unexplained sounds, touches, and voices in the night. The Bell Witch Cave, located near the old Bell Farm, is said to be haunted, and those who enter sometimes leave with chilling stories of their own. The haunting of the Bell family remains unique in the history of supernatural accounts. Unlike vague legends, this case had numerous witnesses, including respected community members and even a future president. It involved physical attacks, intelligent speech, and events that defied explanation. Whether one believes it was truly a witch, a vengeful spirit, or something else entirely, the Bell Witch case continues to fascinate and terrify nearly 2 centuries later. We left off with the chilling death of John Bell, the patriarch of the family, and the Bell Witch's gleeful claim of responsibility. For many, this was the peak of the haunting, the moment the spirit proved it could truly take a human life. But the story of the Bell Witch does not end with John's death. In fact, the legend grew deeper, more layered, and more mysterious as the years went on. After John Bell's funeral in December of 1820, the family hoped for peace. For a brief time, the witch seemed to relent. The terrifying assaults slowed, the voice was heard less frequently, and Betsy, though still plagued, found moments of relief. But the entity was not finished. True to its nature, it enjoyed keeping the family in fear, never allowing them to feel fully safe. Betsy, in particular, could not escape its attention. Her engagement to Joshua Gardner had already ended under the weight of the witch's torment, but the spirit continued to taunt her. Betsy would hear its mocking laughter whenever she tried to find happiness, and witnesses claimed they saw her struck and pinched by invisible forces even after John's death. Eventually, Betsy married another man, Richard Powell, who had long been rumored to have strange knowledge of the supernatural. Some whispered that Powell himself may have had a connection to the witch, though this has never been proven. The entity eventually eased its attacks on Betsy, but whether because it was satisfied or because Powell's presence influenced it, no one can say. In 1,121, the witch made a bold announcement. Speaking in its clear, mocking voice, it declared it would leave the bells alone but would return in 7 years. True to its word, the voice disappeared, and the Bell family slowly began to rebuild their lives. But just as they began to hope the nightmare was over, the spirit returned in 1,828. This time, however, its presence was different. Rather than focusing its cruelty on the bells, the entity engaged in long philosophical conversations with John Bell Jr. It discussed religion, morality, the meaning of life, and even made predictions about the future. Some of these predictions reportedly came true, further deepening the mystery of the spirit's nature. Was this truly a vengeful witch, or was it something else entirely? Something with knowledge beyond human understanding? After this second visit, the witch once again announced it would leave, this time promising to return in 107 years. If the timeline was correct, that would have placed its reappearance in 1935. Though some locals claimed strange events occurred in the area during that year, no major reports surfaced to confirm a haunting as powerful as the one experienced by the bells. Yet the promise of the witch's return continues to haunt the legend, as if it could emerge again at any time. Over the years, the Bell Witch story became deeply embedded in Tennessee folklore. Families passed down tales of the haunting, and visitors to the Bell farm claimed to hear strange noises or see shadowy figures. The Bell Witch Cave, located near where the events took place, became a focal point for paranormal curiosity. The cave, said to be one of the witch's favorite hiding places, has been the site of many alleged supernatural experiences. Visitors report disembodied voices, objects moving on their own, and sudden, overwhelming feelings of dread. Some claim to have been pushed or touched by invisible hands while exploring the darkness of the cave. The cave's eerie reputation has turned it into a destination for ghost hunters, thrill seekers, and believers in the supernatural. For many, entering the Bell Witch Cave is a test of courage, a chance to see whether the witch still lingers in the place where her legend began. But what exactly was the Bell Witch? Over time, numerous theories have emerged. One popular explanation is that the Bell Witch was indeed the ghost of Kate Batts, a neighbor who supposedly felt cheated by John Bell in a land deal. According to legend, she swore to torment him from beyond the grave. However, historical records do not fully support this idea. While Kate Batts was a real woman, there is little evidence she practiced witchcraft or had the kind of relationship with John Bell that would inspire such a curse. Still, the spirit itself identified as Kate, and that was enough for many to believe the connection. Others argue that the Bell Witch was not a witch at all but a poltergeist, a violent, noisy spirit often tied to a particular person, usually a young girl. Given that Betsy Bell was the primary target of attacks, some suggest the entity may have been a manifestation of her own emotional turmoil. Poltergeist activity has been documented in other cases where adolescent girls were involved, leading some paranormal researchers to see parallels between the Bell Witch and similar hauntings worldwide. Another theory pushes the legend into even darker territory. Some believe the Bell Witch was not a human spirit but a demonic entity. Its violent attacks, mocking laughter, and knowledge of the future all fit descriptions of demonic hauntings. The fact that it tormented an entire family drove Betsy to despair and took John Bell's life adds weight to this interpretation. To believers in the supernatural, the Bell Witch may have been less about vengeance and more about pure evil unleashed on the bells. Skeptics, however, have long tried to explain the events rationally. Some suggest the haunting was nothing more than a combination of superstition, local gossip, and exaggeration. In a rural community in the early 1800s, stories spread quickly, and fear could easily turn normal sounds or misfortunes into signs of the supernatural. Others point to the possibility that someone within the Bell family, or someone outside it, was behind the disturbances, either as a prank or as part of a hidden agenda. Yet the sheer number of witnesses, including respected community members, makes it difficult to dismiss the case entirely. The Bell Witch legend also influenced American culture in significant ways. It became one of the earliest and most famous ghost stories in the United States, predating many of the more modern tales of hauntings. Its influence can be seen in countless books, films, and television shows, inspiring everything from horror movies to paranormal investigations. The idea of a violent, intelligent spirit capable of speech and physical harm set the stage for much of the supernatural lore that followed. Even today, the Bell Witch remains a subject of fascination for paranormal researchers. Investigators visit the area, recording strange sounds and attempting to capture evidence of the spirit. Tourists flock to the Bell Witch Cave, eager to experience a connection to one of America's darkest legends. And in the quiet rural lands of Tennessee, the story lives on, whispered from one generation to the next. But perhaps the most chilling part of the legend is its unfinished nature. If the witch could return once, as she did in 1,828, could she return again? Was her promise of a 107-year reappearance in 1935 fulfilled quietly, or is it still looming in the future? The uncertainty ensures that the Bell Witch's presence is never truly gone, always lurking in the shadows of American folklore. The Bell Witch haunting endures not just because of the terror it inflicted, but because of what it represents. It is a story of fear, faith, and the battle between the seen and unseen. It is about the fragility of life in the face of forces we cannot understand, and about how easily the ordinary can turn into the extraordinary. As we close this tale, imagine the darkness of a Tennessee night in the early 1800s. The Bell family lying awake, listening to scratching, knocking, and laughter in the walls. Betsy crying as invisible hands torment her. John Bell, growing weaker as a voice whispers threats of death. And the witch herself, mocking, cruel, and ever-present, a voice in the night that no one could silence. This is the legacy of the Bell Witch, the most terrifying spirit in American history, a story that refuses to die, and a haunting that still echoes through time.